Welcome to Foolish Catholic. This podcast is about making Catholicism really awkward because Catholicism needs to be awkward or you aren't taking it seriously. Catholic parishes across the world teach a class called RCIA. It's a class to prepare people who are interested in becoming Catholic or for people who want to learn more about Catholicism. This class has this repeated problem of failing when it becomes too nice, too technical, too polite, too practical. All these ways it becomes comfortable and not awkward. And it needs to be awkward because it's probably the only class in the world where you're just sitting down with someone and saying, so you want to know the meaning of life? And it's not some academic meaning. It's not some technical knowledge that can fit on a sheet of paper. It is the meaning of my life, of your life, of all society. And to talk about it, you have to sit psychologically naked across the table from another person. No one wants to do that. You're basically asking someone to be vulnerable, and then you're asking them to give up everything, to die to self, to invert all of their values, etc. And you have to do it yourself and admit that you're kind of bad at it. And that only in life, when you've taken your own advice, have you really had the payoff and experienced that wonderful thing that you're given access to, which is infinite life through Jesus Christ. Fear is a sucky motivation. It's a sucky motivation, especially in religion, because it doesn't drive you towards a meaningful, loving relationship. I tend to tune people out when they try to use fear to motivate me to do anything, and literally people who use fear to motivate you are terrorists. And maybe you've met a few Christian terrorists. They're going to talk about hellfire and damnation and why you have to turn to God. And maybe that works sometimes when we need a wake-up call, but it isn't enough of a motivation to live a truly Christian life, because it puts you in a defensive posture like you're the prey and trying to escape your fate. You're trying to avoid or run from something as opposed to run to something. There's a different motivation, and it's a little bit scary too, but fundamentally this motivation comes from desire. It puts you on a search or a quest. What if you live your life without meaning? That's a problem. In the first situation we talk about hell, great. Maybe you can have a good party now. It's a little bit of a Faustian bargain. You're going to burn eternally, but we'll just party it up now. I kind of make this Faustian deal every time I eat a donut. It's a party now, going to pay for it later. But without meaning, you can't even have a good party. It's like having a permanent buzzkill. Your life's going to suck, and if you try to grab onto some silly meaning like be all you can be, or your work is your meaning, or even your family is your meaning, you always find it empty at the end of the day. It's almost like you have to build yourself up and hope that that's true, but it's not really true. And that sounds kind of harsh. And if you're suffering from depression and you need something to get out of bed in the morning and you decide it's your work or your family, go for it. But all of those things can be taken away. Man needs meaning beyond all these things. And you can't be fully honest with yourself. You can't live consistent with truth until you have that meaning. When you're short of that meaning, you're always lying to yourself a little bit, and that lying stresses you out. It is bad for your health. And you can't trust yourself when you're lying to yourself, and that's why it kind of sucks. We need a meaning that grounds us in this truth. Somehow you arrived here to consider Catholicism as that possible meaning, or at least a path to that meaning. And this isn't just some modern weird way of talking about it where it's like live the path or live the question or walk the road or whatever. There's actually a very Jesus way of talking. Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. He is a way, like in a sense, a process of following that is based on truth, that goes to life. And that is what you're really considering here. And you might ask, I didn't really come here necessarily looking for meaning. And when you go around an RCIA first class, you can ask, why are you here? And you get lots of answers. You go, I want to marry a Catholic, or my grandma was Catholic and I want to make her happy, or seemed like a good idea. I know a lot of nice Catholics, or my mom made me. A few people actually come because that is what they're looking for, is the meaning, but we all have to end up there. You can ask, how did people come to Jesus? Some people came accidentally. Some people came proud. Some people came embarrassed. Some of them were prostitutes. Some of them were uptight church people already. Some of them were the sick, the poor, the lawyers, the government officials, not really bankers, but, I hope bankers are in RCIA too. Love bankers, by the way. And you're all here to tackle this awkward question. And you're kind of cheating because you're listening to a podcast where you probably have all your clothes on, and I have all my clothes on. And we can't have that type of psychological nudity where you confess, where you admit your weaknesses and where you can get these issues directly addressed and answered, that only comes from being in a real dynamic RCIA environment, and you need to search that out. It's not enough to merely like go through the intellectual process without these friendships, these spiritual friendships to help you along the way. It's through each other that we complete each other. That's why we even have a church, or we'd all be worshiping separately out in a field somewhere. So you need other people to flesh this out. But if you have any questions or comments, or you think I'm wrong or crazy, or even if you want to become an internet troll in life, please post them, please send them in, please like these videos and subscribe. And even if this video is like 2 years old, or this podcast 2 years old when you get it, go ahead and subscribe. There's probably a human on the other end. And if there isn't a human on the other end, like me or somebody else at Simple House, we'll put some artificial intelligence on there to talk to you. This podcast, this approach to RCIA is going to be new because it's not going to get off track in one of the two major ways things get off track. We're going to try to just take the bull by the horns and go straight down the center of the street. We're not going to try to become overly practical or overly academic. With the academic approach, you just run into libraries and libraries of Catholic literature, spiritual writing, teachings, philosophy, all that type of stuff. And you can't learn all of that, even if you start studying now until the end of your lifetime. And you can't view RCIA as the first class of that long study ahead of you. It has to be more than that. When I had Monsignor Pope was one of the first pastors who helped me when I was founding a ministry called Simple House. And he ran a Bible study. And he started the Bible study by saying, "It is not my goal that you learn every word of this letter of St. Paul. It is my goal that when you leave here, you could write this letter of St. Paul." That's a very different idea. It's saying, let's get down to the nugget of simplicity, or the kernel that created all that academic literature, that created even the best spiritual writings. We'll talk about some academic things to help get in touch with that kernel, but you, regardless of your education or IQ level, can get access to that kernel. That's one of the radical Christian claims. Kernel. Worth thinking about this concept. I love this concept. It's kind of a mathematical concept. It's a computer science concept. I assume the word was used earlier than that to mean essence and things like this. But in math, you deal with matrices at times, and matrices can be redundant. Like one matrix could just be this other matrix times 2, right? So you have this matrix that is largely redundant with this other matrix. To find the kernel is to strip all the information, redundant information out of a matrix down, simplify it down as far as you can to get the thing that originates all the other derivative matrices. That's the kernel. In computer science, it's the piece of code that actually interacts with the hard drive. It's a piece of code that people almost never get. You could be a professional computer programmer and never deal with the kernel, that most basic piece of code. But it's like the essence. It's what you're doing with all the time, but you may actually never touch that code. That's what we're trying to get to in this religion. And what is this kernel of Catholicism? Is the Lord, or maybe the essence of the Lord's ways. It's like getting to know him. You're not trying to just get to know Catholic trappings and small traditions and culture and when to stand and when to kneel. You're trying to get to know who he is and where all of this comes from and what the essence of this is. And there are fools. There are uneducated people who are not fools, but who know this in a profound way, far greater than really learned men. And it's my hope to get all of us to that and better at that and refine that. And we sometimes refine that by bumping into each other and comparing our ideas. And it may not matter if you ever open a book of theology, you can still have this little kernel of faith that makes it all make sense. And if this kernel could have been put on a sheet of paper, if it could have been like, Clark, why didn't you do a 10-minute podcast and just explain the kernel? I can't do that. If it could be done, Jesus would have done it. Catholicism and Jesus have nothing to hide. It's all out there. And it doesn't fit on that sheet of paper because it doesn't even fit fully in your mind. It's kind of beyond our language and conceptual abilities. The best we can do is get a sense of it. And the best we can do when we talk about it is just kind of beat around the bush about it and kind of help each other, kind of be more open to the Holy Spirit to put that essence and understanding into us. Besides the academic ways RCIA can get off track and just become comfortable and just become a little class of logic and things like this, RCIA can also get too comfortable by being too practical. There's so many little cultural things with Catholicism, And they're awesome. They actually can draw people to the faith. They can make your life fuller. There's even people who aren't Catholic at all who just love participating in Catholic culture. And they can even bring you to this RCIA class. But none of them are at the essence. And I can't even tell you how long I was Catholic when I still didn't really understand when to stand, when to sit, when to kneel during Mass, or even the full structure of Mass. I went through thousands of Masses before I got that down, because you can just fake it till you make it, man. And you have to deal with the essence, that awkward essence, as more important than all of that. And there's a lot of nobility and energy behind evangelical Protestantism. And I think it's because it kind of strips away all this practical necessities in culture. And just, it's like a dragster where they just took everything about the car that they didn't think was necessary off and just got the engine there. And that approach succeeds in one very important thing. You cannot miss the main point. But it sometimes strips away too much and you don't get the full message. You don't get everything that you want to get in the Catholic Church. But I have to say, it's a lot better method than missing the main point by being too practical and being too obsessed with the periphery stuff as opposed to the core. The talk following this one is called The Catholic Proposal. In essence, this is just episode 0 trying to tell you what we're trying to do with this series. We're not going to start in the Catholic Proposal asking, is Jesus the Son of God? Or more simply, is Jesus God? That is the Catholic question or the Catholic proposal if you're already a believing Jew. The problem is modern man has so many other concerns and things they have to accept even before they can ask the question, is Jesus Christ God? Do you believe in God at all? Do you believe God is an all good creator? Do you believe in sin? Not just other people's sin, but the sin that is tainting you that you're struggling with right now. And do you believe in living a good life is just something that you can decide to do and you're strong enough to do? Or do you believe it's impossible and that you need help and need to be transformed? These are concepts that the ancient world already had when Jesus hit the scene, and some of these concepts we've lost. So that's what you're going to get in the next episode. And before you go there, here's your little boilerplate. Please subscribe and like this series. It's part of the RCIA series, and it's on iTunes. It's called Foolish Catholic. On YouTube, it's part of the Simple House channel. You can click a playlist there. Please like, review, subscribe, and comment. You can also send us an email at asimplehouse@gmail.com. And I hope to answer comments in a future video. And please check out simplehouse.org to learn more about our ministry.